So with its third film now in cinemas, can the franchise that had arguably the most vanilla installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe deliver with this one? Let's get into it. So Thor Ragnarok is the third film in the Thor franchise, and it stars Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Mark Ruffalo as Hulk, and Tom Hiddleston as Loki. And after a series of events at the start of the film, it sees Thor being flung to a far-off planet of Sakaar, where he is held prisoner and is made to fight in a contest of champions against the Hulk, which we know from the trailers. And he also has to escape this planet because Hela, the goddess of death, has taken control of Asgard. Now Hela is played by Cate Blanchett in this film, and she's actually a really great villain. A lot of the plot line actually centers around what she is doing. So it doesn't necessarily suffer like the other Thor films have from having a villain that either isn't there for the most part or doesn't have a lot to do, but actually instead has a villain that brings a lot to the piece, which is a really interesting thing to see. And without saying too much more, lest there be spoilers in this video, she does a lot of stuff that has a lot of effect in this film. Now, one thing I will say in favour of Thor Ragnarok is that it is definitely not as vanilla as the last film was. So they obviously knew that what they were doing with Thor the Dark World didn't really hit home that well, because the more seriously they took the Norse mythology aspect of the film, the more it kind of stagnated, and the only 2 points of comedy in those films were really from Loki saying something sarcastic to someone, or someone saying something sarcastic to Loki, or from Kat Dennings, and the rest of it kind of felt like there was trying to be humour around the subject, but it didn't really hit home, rather than it out and out being direct humour. And with this Thor Ragnarok installment, it's like Marvel kind of realised, hey, we don't have to have these fantastical characters set in relatable settings so that people can kind of believe in them or find it easier to get into the film. What we can actually do is have these fantastical characters set in completely fantastical worlds. We have the capabilities to build up entirely ridiculous worlds where there's stuff that no one would ever believe to see. And I love that that aspect has been introduced, so you can see these completely fantastical set pieces. And all of it is pure escapism. And that's what the Thor series really needed an injection of. Now there's obviously a heap of new characters introduced in Thor Ragnarok, including the Grandmaster, played by Jeff Goldblum, Valkyrie, played by Tessa Thompson, and a character named Korg, who's actually voiced by the director, Taika Waititi. And that character's actually from Planet Hulk, the graphic novel. So this is actually a coming together of a Thor Ragnarok storyline and a Planet Hulk storyline, kind of crossing over, which makes this more of a buddy road trip comedy, and I like that Marvel are doing that, because it's kind of like their films are now following certain tropes, like Spider-Man was the teenage coming-of-age storyline, and now this is like a buddy road trip comedy. There's more than one aspect to it being a superhero movie or a comic book movie, that it's also this kind of movie. And the great thing is that having that aspect of it being a comedy movie means it's much easier to enjoy than Thor the Dark World was. So we had the seriousness in the first Thor film, and that was great because it's setting up the character, and there is some humour when he's kind of discovering what life is like on Midgard, or Earth, and that was part of his character development, and it's great to have that in a first film. But by the second film, they kind of needed to expand on that a little more, and instead it just grew a little stale. But instead, Thor Ragnarok goes all out with the comedy, and there's comedy from the characters, there's comedy about the characters, there's just kind of this air of ridiculousness about the world that they find themselves on. So none of it is really taken too seriously, but that makes it easier to enjoy. One thing I have to say that I think this film loses points on is that I felt it didn't really need the whole scene with Doctor Strange. While I was watching it, it felt like it was a little bit out of place. And the only reasons that it was there was to A, show that Doctor Strange is also existing in this shared universe and knows Thor and knows Loki, and B, to have it there because it was teased at the end of Doctor Strange. And I felt like that was the only reason for it being there. And after the scene was over, I felt like that's all we got from it. Then it was a little bit out of place, and it was 5 minutes that didn't really make a difference to the plot overall. But all of that aside, I enjoyed seeing Hulk getting some proper screen time and some proper lines and actually becoming a character in this film. Not that he wasn't in the other Avengers films, because he really was, but giving him more of a part to play in this film, I really enjoyed seeing. I liked seeing the changing of some status quo without saying too much and spoiling parts. And ultimately this made for a great buddy road trip comedy Marvel film. And with that in mind, Thor Ragnarok gets 4 stars from me. You could say it gets 4 stars? No. And one of the reasons it gets such a high star rating from me is, while I was watching this film and watching the aesthetics and the colours and the tone of the film and the kind of feel of the world that they built up, I kind of felt like Taika Waititi was making like a modern day version of Flash Gordon. And I felt like that was something that was really kind of unique about this film. So Thor Ragnarok, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Do you want to see more from Thor now that all of this has been changed from Thor the Dark World? And who would you like to see him partner with in his next exploits? Obviously not Infinity War, because that's next, but after that is what I'm saying. Either way, all comments are welcome in the comment section below. Let's talk nerdy. As always, if you've enjoyed what you've seen here and you want to see more, you can click right here to subscribe and see more in the future. And until that point, I will see you next time.